I like to think of consistency as one of those video games where it's just like really, really hard and you just can't make any progress no matter how hard you try. And then you find out that the game's actually really easy to hack. So you just download a hack client onto your computer and suddenly the game becomes completely and totally pointlessly easy. And I think one of the reasons it's like this is because it's just so full of these hidden self-perpetuating cycles where you just have to start doing the right actions and then you activate this loop where one thing leads to another. It's a chain reaction that keeps repeating itself over and over and it just keeps accelerating. And all you have to do is press start and the rest takes care of itself, going on and on and on and on forever with no intervention from yourself. So with all of that said, let's get into infinite cycles. So I think it would be completely unfair to you if I didn't start with the strongest loop of them all, the identity reinforcement loop. But at the same time, I don't think I can just throw you off into the deep end, show you this massive web of different nodes connecting to each other, expect you to understand it all, and then let you off on your merry way. I think it's best we start simpler, from the very core principles and axioms of consistency, and then build back up from there. So why is identity so important? Well, it controls just about every action we do. And more than motivation, more than discipline, more than your environment, your identity is the key behind every action and every decision that you take every single day. And controlling this is the key to controlling everything else. And you might not believe me at first and think I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but allow me to point you to one of the most famous, if not the most famous, consistency book of our time, Atomic Habits. I'm sure you've heard of it, and it has multiple quotes in the very early chapters talking about the power of identity and how it's the core behind everything else. In it, he says that behind every system of actions is a system of beliefs, and behavior that is incongruent with the self cannot last. Your habits are how you embody your identity. Those are pretty strong words coming from such a well-known book. So clearly, identity must be pretty important. But to illustrate it further, let me give you an example. Imagine two people. Both of them are in the exact same position and both of them are offered a cigarette. They're both trying to quit, and one says, "No thank you, I'm trying to quit." The other says, "No thank you, I'm not a smoker." Which one of these people do you think are more likely to successfully quit smoking? Even though everything else was the same, you'd probably have to say the second person. And why is that? We can all intuitively sense that for some reason, the second person must be more likely to be able to quit in this scenario. But why? Because the first person is trying to do the action of quitting. The other person is becoming the identity of quitting. And that subtle distinction, even in the wording that they choose to use when talking to that other person, is the main difference maker in deciding how this will actually turn out for them. So in this sort of chain of the results, the actions that make them up, and the identity, right? Most people look at the results. That's where they start. They look at where they want to go. And then they look at, okay, what goes into results? And they look one step back and they see actions. And they stop there. They're like, oh yes, actions leads to results. That must be it. I've solved it. This is my key to success. Yes, and they just stop there. But there is another layer to this. You can go deeper. And the layer behind action is identity. And without changing that, you can't change identity. The same way you can't just stop at the results node and just try to say, oh, to get the results, I need to get the results. Yes, but what do you have to do to get the results, right? That makes sense to us that, you can't just get the results by starting at that stage. You have to go one step back, right? But actually, it's just as stupid to start at the action stage because, okay, yes, but what do you have to do the actions? And you might think, oh, I just do the actions. But you're just like the person who's trying to do the results by doing the results. There's another layer behind that, and that's identity. So we need to control our identity. But that begs the question, if we're using this logic of thinking where we're looking at, oh, okay, this step is the thing behind that thing, that's the thing behind that thing, okay, what controls identity? How do we change our identity? And you can think about it this way. Basically, our brain is not stupid, right? It's trying to make the most rational assumption it can about the world around us. So if you're looking at the collection of all of your beliefs, which is your identity, every belief that you have about yourself and how you relate to the world, if you just add those up, that's you, that's your identity. So if we look at each of those individual beliefs, how does your brain form those? It looks at every experience that you've ever had, and it factors all of those together to arrive at one final conclusion, one final belief, and that's your belief. It's just based on every experience that you've had in the past. So if we're thinking about this in the context of consistency, well then what is going to be the experience that leads to that identity? Well, it's going to base it off of how consistent you've been in the past. And that all makes perfect sense until you think about it for a second and you realize that that must mean the action of consistency leads to the identity of consistency. But I thought the identity of consistency was supposed to lead to the action of consistency. Well, what's happened is we have a loop, a self-perpetuating cycle. The actions lead to the identity, and the identity leads to the actions. And to further support this with Atomic Habits, I have two quotes over here describing both ways of that loop, both of them reinforcing each other and getting stronger with every rotation. And then this feedback loop feeds into the results, just basically generating you more and more of them. But speaking of results, surely your results are going to factor into your experiences, which lead to your beliefs as well, right? The sort of accolades you have, the sort of achievements that you've gotten in your life, certainly those factor into your identity, right? Well, they do. And so as you can see in this three-step process stemming from the identity, every step along the way then feeds back into the identity, causing more of it. So the stronger that identity is, the more of those actions you do, which leads to more of the identity, more of the actions, which leads to results, which then feeds back into the identity, and it just continuously reinforces itself over and over again. It's like basically rolling a ball down a hill. You just have to give it that first initial push, and then gravity will take care of all the rest. It'll just keep accelerating and accelerating. You don't have to chase after it and like push it the whole way. It's not like you're on a flat surface. It's actually you're on a hill, and you can just give it the slightest push, and it just rolls on its own. Okay, that's a lot, but we know what we need to do. How do we get the ball to start rolling? Well, here's the thing. Your ball is already rolling, just in the wrong direction. You see, this spiral doesn't only go upward, it can go either way. It can go either up or down. And in your case, unless you've been 100% consistent with your habit tracker every day for your entire life, you're likely not on that upward spiral right now. And that means that every single day that you wait, you continue to fall down further and further into the negative spiral. You've actually pushed your ball down the opposite side, the side of I'm not consistent, which is the identity that leads to the action of not being consistent, which leads to you even further believing that you're not consistent, and it loops just the same, except in the opposite direction. And this applies to just about every belief you have. Your ball cannot be in the middle at its neutral point. It's like imagine the tip of a mountain, right? Your ball is balanced so delicately at the very top, and the slightest push, the slightest anything will get it to start rolling in some direction. The only case in which your ball can be at like the absolute tip is if nothing, like it must be a belief that you have had zero experiences about, but like that you know nothing about. You've never even heard of it, because even hearing of it will give you some sort of first impression. So that means that our goal is not just to figure out how to give the ball the initial push. It's to figure out, okay, our ball is chasing us down this hill right now and getting faster and faster. And this ball is pretty big. It looks like a boulder, right, in this illustration. So we need to find out how we're gonna turn around, actually start pushing that boulder up and push it down the other side of the mountain. And then, as in that third illustration, once you get it over that edge, once you finally do that, then from there it's easy peasy and the ball just rolls down on its own. And that stage where that person is pushing the boulder up the hill is where most people get stuck on. But it's also worth noting that you don't actually stay stuck in this pushing the boulder up phase for long. It's just that most people don't know that they're even trying to push a boulder up. Like for most people, they don't even know the boulder exists, and they're just being like, they've already been squashed by it. They're just rolling down with the boulder. It's like if you become aware of the boulder's existence and just try pushing it up, it's actually not that much of a distance, and you can push it up quite quickly and get it over that edge, okay? So how do we do that? Well, we just need to go back to that sort of cycle that we illustrated earlier and look at each step, and we have to look at, okay, where can we infiltrate this to input like positive inputs instead of the negative ones, and kind of infiltrate this loop to start circulating positive feedback rather than the negative one that you have going right now. So the first one is results, and as we've established earlier, it's hard to achieve big results, just input those big results. But actually, you don't need big results. And this is something that people don't really think about a lot, but every day you go through many experiences that you can interpret in many ways. So again, if we're going to that belief of, let's say, I'm good at sales, that's your belief, right? You might believe that you're not good at sales. But then if you walk through your day and you look really hard for every possible piece of evidence that you're actually good at sales, you'll find a ton, hundreds if you're good enough at it, right? Every single day. Every time you convince someone to do anything, every time you do anything remotely in any sort of connection to sales, like the connection can be so loose, so made up, like it might not even make sense, but you can find some connection, some evidence. You always can, right? And so by interpreting these, by marking these, you add tiny results that will encourage you to change your identity. Actions, now for actions, you just give yourself easy wins. So make the actions really easy, and then you can do those easy actions, and it doesn't matter whether the actions are easy as hard or hard, it's just that you get them done. And as long as you get them done, you're putting positive inputs into this loop, and the truth is that if you try to do really hard habits, you're just not going to do them, and it's not going to work, and you're going to feed negative inputs into this. And the last thing we need is more negative inputs coming in while we're trying to push this boulder up, right? And this is really hard because most people's egos get in the way, but just do something that you know you can do consistently every day. It's not that hard. Literally, it's not that hard. Just make it easy, right? And then finally, identity. Now, identity is a really complicated topic. You can use affirmations and visualizations. You can use these other things we've mentioned, but I've made a full in-depth guide on it, which is my previous video. So if you want to learn more about identity, you can check it out there. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. And okay, so that's loop number one. But to get to the other loop, which is also just as big, we first have to understand the golden statement of consistency. Basically, it's I always get 100% on my habit tracker, and I must get 100% on my habit tracker. These two sentences, if you truly believe and embody these two sentences, you will become consistent, and I can guarantee you that 100%. Okay, so how do we achieve them? Well, it's pretty clear. The first one is just a matter of identity, and we've covered the identity. The second one, on the other hand, is a matter of stakes. Basically, something to be gained or lost. Okay, well, what's stakes? Let's do a brief overview of it, because I've covered it in the past, but you kind of need to understand it. Basically, stakes, something to be gained or lost, we can think of it in three categories. Rewards, which is what you get, good thing you get for doing it in the short term. Punishment, which is what happens in the short term if you don't do it. And then implications, which is basically the long-term implications of doing this habit or not doing this habit over and over again. And technically, implications is not really distinct from reward or punishment in the sense that, oh, it's good or bad. It can be either. It's just, it's further out into the future, and because of that, our brain processes it differently. So for the sake of clarity, it's easier to categorize them in this way. Okay, so how valuable is one given specific stake? Well, as it turns out, how motivating something is, well, there's already an equation for that, and it's made by Alex Hormozi. It's the value equation, which says basically the dream outcome, so how good the dream outcome is, perceived by the likelihood of achievement, divided by the time delay and the effort and sacrifice required equals value, right? So if we transfer this over to let's make our rewards motivating, that means that we have to maximize the desirability, the perceived likelihood of achievement, the immediacy, and the ease of achievement. And then we can flip all of those, make them reversed for the punishment, right? And it's also important to note that punishments are weighted more heavily than rewards because this loss aversion bias we have in our heads. We'd rather not lose something than gain something. So that's pretty interesting. Now, before we get into all of that, I just want to take a quick break from this video to tell you about the free community we have. Basically, we have free courses and resources in there to really get you to that 100% consistency. And along with that, we have a community of like-minded men who are also trying to become consistent and will keep you accountable with your habits. So if you're trying to become more consistent, your actionable step right now is to just go to the very first link in the description and join. Again, it's completely free. And with that said, let's get right back into the video. And the sum of all of these weighted stakes, so if you put every single stake associated with an action into this Hormozy formula and then add them all up, that's the gravity of that activity. And based on the gravity of the activity, it gets categorized on the scale from could to should to must. And could, should, must, they're not exactly points. They're more like categories, they're areas, right? So it can be really deep into must or just barely in must, right? And there's a big difference between those, but these are just three broad categories. And the goal is to get our habit tracker as deep into the must as possible. And to do that, we need stakes. Okay, great. Now let's talk about the loops. The thing is, unlike with identity, loops are not inherently built into stakes. The instant we think about stakes, it's not like, oh, there's the loop. Because with identity, it was kind of like that. Instead, with stakes, it's more about which stake, right? Because stakes can come from many, many different things, and depending on which stake you have, that's where the loop itself comes from. So let's talk about streaks. And it's probably one of the most underrated things in all of consistency. So if you think about the reward, okay, it's not bad, it's instant, you get it, you get this number go up, okay. But the real secret lies into punishment, because the punishment grows bigger every time the streak grows. And as we said, punishments are really effective. So for streaks, we can kind of visualize it like this, where the streaks lead to punishments and a little bit of rewards, but that doesn't increase. And that leads to stakes, which leads to contributing to the golden statement, which then increases your consistency. And when you're more consistent, that increases your streak, and so on and so forth, inducing another loop. And this loop takes hold faster. So if you don't believe me, here's an example. I once got an over 200-day streak on a meditation app. And what's impressive is not getting that far, right? A lot of people find that impressive. I don't think it's that impressive. I don't think 200 days is much more impressive than 100 days. Because once you get to 100 days, the rest is already a given, right? You just will continue that streak no matter what. If I gave you a 200-day streak right now, and I gave you the option to either be lazy and not meditate, or to keep that 200 days of hard work that you've put in keep going, you're not going to just let 200 days of hard work go to waste. You would never do that. And this works in the same way, and that takes hold a lot faster. You don't have to get to 200 days for this to be effective. And if you still don't believe me, just look at all the video games. I remember that I was talking to my little brother once, and he was going off to this camp where he wouldn't be able to bring his iPad. And of all the things he was thinking about, he told me, hey, can you log into Brawl Stars for me and claim my login streak? Because I need to keep that streak going. That streak, that wasn't even that important, didn't even give that many rewards, but just not losing that streak was so firmly a must in his mind that that's the thing he thought about. He got me to claim that streak while he was gone so it would keep going, right? So one last example. Imagine if you had a 1,000-day streak, right? Would you ever miss that habit? I know it's a bit of an extreme example, but at that point, that habit would become a part of your pride and identity. Wait, identity. It would become a part of your identity, because if we incorporate it into this, right, identity is also in stakes, because our identity, when it leads to pride and ego, when our pride and ego is attached to something, that acts as a sort of stake. Because then if you do really badly in that thing, your ego is gonna get really hurt. And that's a big punishment that we don't want. So if we look at this, it's the same habit loop that we saw earlier with the identity reinforcement, but you'll also see that now there's pride leading into stakes and enforcing it from the other direction. And okay, that's great. And streaks also tie into this. So if we incorporate that in as well, you see that streaks are a result that enforces your identity. So think about it this way with that example. if you had a 200+ day streak with meditation, you would say, huh, that's a result, right? That 200+ day streak that affirms the identity. You'd be like, I have a 200+ day streak of meditation. I must be consistent in that meditation. It's impossible to arrive at any other conclusion about your identity. If that's the reality of things, if that's your result, that must be your identity, or else you're stupid, right? If you have a 200+ day streak, you are consistent. It's just objectively so. And again, streaks are also going to be leading into punishments and rewards, which is going to be further enforcing your stakes. So if you look at this, all of this stuff, that's what you saw in the beginning. At the very beginning of the video, this is what I showed you. And now you've just built it from the ground up, and you could probably explain to someone else everything that is contained within this graph. And now you know how to implement it. Now you know how to shift your identity to get all of these loops going. You know how to use streaks to get these loops going. And I bet you can understand, I bet it's not hard to believe, right, that once you have a strong identity, once you've got a strong streak going, it's just getting started that's the hard part. Once you get it started, it's on autopilot. It takes care of itself. You don't need to think about, oh, I need to get the cue, craving, response, reward, 4 laws of behavior change. When you have a 200-day streak, it just takes care of itself. And I can vouch for this for the many successes that I've had using these techniques. So start making use of these cycles and watch your life self-perpetuate its way to success. And if you're trying to screenshot all of this, don't, because, well, it's attached in the free school community. So if you just join there right now, the free school community is going to be the first link in the description, and there I have all of these video graphs. So join right now, it's completely free, and I'll see you in there.